"I've sold your beach house, Mom. We're leaving tomorrow." That was the sentence that cracked my heart in half. She didn't even look at me when she said it, just stood there, staring out the window like she was talking about the weather. I remember the way her reflection trembled in the glass, phone in one hand, suitcase by the door. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. Maybe she was joking, maybe I was dreaming. But then I saw the brown envelope sitting on the coffee table, thick and official-looking, stamped with the name of a real estate company I didn't recognize. My hands went cold. I felt something inside me slide, like the floor itself had shifted. I picked up the envelope. My name was written across it in a handwriting that looked almost like mine, but not quite. I opened it slowly, my fingers shaking. The words inside didn't make sense at first. Property transfer agreement. Final sale completed. My voice barely made it out. Sold? Vanessa, what do you mean sold? She didn't even flinch. She just turned her head a little, her tone flat and practiced, like she'd rehearsed it. You'll thank me later, Mom. You shouldn't be living out here alone anyway. Thank her? For what? For erasing my husband's fingerprints from these walls? For selling the only place that ever felt like home? My throat tightened. The silence between us was heavy, thick with something that didn't feel like love anymore. It felt like betrayal, the kind that doesn't scream, it just quietly replaces you. I tried to stay calm. Vanessa, this house was your father's dream. We built it together, every nail, every window. She cut me off before I could finish. Dad's gone, Mom, it's just a house. But it wasn't just a house. It was where we buried his ashes, right under the fig tree he planted when she was born. I could still hear his laughter echoing in the old hallway when the wind blew just right. And now my daughter, the child we prayed for, was telling me it meant nothing. I took a step toward her, my knees weak, but she stepped back like I was the one doing something wrong. Vanessa, I whispered. Please tell me this isn't true. She sighed, that impatient sigh that children give their parents when they think they're being dramatic. Mom, you don't understand. It's for the best. You can't take care of this place anymore. For the best. Those words felt like knives. She didn't see the memories peeling off the walls with the old paint. She didn't see me crying every night by the window after her father died. All she saw were numbers on a contract, and a man's promise that he'd take care of everything. I turned toward the papers again, scanning the signature at the bottom. My breath caught in my chest. The name written there was mine, or at least it looked like mine. Every letter mimicked my handwriting perfectly. My heart pounded. Vanessa, I said slowly. Who signed this? She didn't answer. Her eyes darted toward the door, then back at me. I held up the paper, my voice rising despite the lump in my throat. Who signed this, Vanessa? This isn't me! She finally met my gaze, cold, unflinching. Mom, stop making this harder than it has to be. Harder? She forged my name, sold my house. My husband's grave was still in the backyard, and she was talking about tomorrow. The ground seemed to tilt beneath me. I dropped the envelope and stepped back, the room spinning. For a moment, I thought I might faint. I remember gripping the edge of the sofa, my nails digging into the fabric. The smell of sea salt came through the window, mixed with the faint scent of her perfume. My daughter, my baby, was standing there like a stranger. How had we come to this? I had sacrificed everything for her, and now she was watching me unravel without an ounce of remorse. She walked past me to the door, her voice low but firm. It's done, Mom. Just pack your things. You'll see. It's better this way. The door closed behind her, leaving a trail of silence so deep it hurt my ears. I sank to the floor, clutching the forged contract against my chest, feeling my pulse in every inch of my body. I don't remember how long I sat there. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. The light outside faded from gold to gray, and still I didn't move. The only sound was the soft crash of waves outside, the same waves my husband used to say would guard us forever. But that night, they sounded different. They sounded like they were mourning with me. I didn't know what scared me more, the fact that my daughter had sold my home, or the way her voice had no trace of guilt. Something deeper was wrong. Something beyond greed or carelessness. It was as if she was following someone else's orders. Someone who wanted this house gone as much as she did. I stood up, legs trembling, and looked around the room one last time. The photographs on the mantel seemed to stare back at me. My wedding picture, her baby shoes, her father's favorite hat still hanging by the door. Every piece of this place told our story, but now, that story had been stolen, and as I turned the paper over again, a faint stamp caught my eye, one I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't just any real estate company. It was a private buyer's seal. Someone had bought my house directly, not through any agency. My chest tightened as realization crept in. Vanessa hadn't just sold my home. She had sold it to someone specific, someone she didn't want me to know about. I didn't know then. But that forged signature was more than a lie. It was the first step in a plan that had my name written all over it. Because what she didn't tell me was who she'd really sold it to. I used to think grief was the hardest thing a heart could endure, but I was wrong. Grief teaches you to live with absence. Betrayal teaches you to live with doubt. After my husband died, I poured everything I had into keeping our little family together. The beach house wasn't just a home, it was a promise. His promise to me and mine to our daughter Vanessa. I told myself that as long as I could keep that promise alive, she would never feel the hole her father left behind. When the funeral ended and the world moved on, she was all I had left. I remember her face that day, pale, trembling, lost. I held her hand and whispered, "You still have me." From that moment, my life revolved around her. Every decision, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, all for Vanessa. I sold my jewelry to pay her tuition. I skipped meals to make sure she never missed a class trip. I even mortgaged part of our beach house just to help her open that boutique she always dreamed of. I thought I was building her a future. I didn't realize I was teaching her how to take everything from me. At first, I blamed the world for changing her. The city had swallowed her whole. New friends with shallow smiles, parties I was never invited to, and a wardrobe that looked nothing like the girl who used to wear her father's old sweaters. I told myself she was just finding her way, but slowly the phone calls grew shorter. The visits became rarer, and when she did come home, she wasn't alone anymore. His name was Elliot. He had that kind of face people trust too quickly. Soft eyes, gentle voice, the kind of man who smiles with his mouth but never with his eyes. The first time he shook my hand, he said, "You deserve to rest, Mrs. James. Let Vanessa handle things now." His grip was firm, his tone calm, but something in his words unsettled me. Rest? I wasn't tired. I was still living, still fighting. But maybe that was his point. Maybe he wanted me to stop fighting. I watched the way Vanessa looked at him, the way she deferred to him, the way she seemed smaller beside him. It wasn't love in her eyes. It was dependence, the kind that comes wrapped in comfort and control. Still, I tried to be happy for her. She'd lost her father so young. Maybe she just wanted someone to lean on. I told myself I was overthinking it. After all, she smiled when he was around, didn't she? But there was something hollow about her smile. Like she was performing it. Then one evening, while cleaning her old room, I found a letter on her desk. An unopened bill from the boutique she was supposed to open 6 months earlier. I remember tracing my finger over the logo. The paper was crisp, untouched. The boutique, as far as I knew, was still an idea on paper. I'd given her the money, signed the loan, trusted her word. But as I looked around the room, there was no sign of business plans, no sketches, no invoices, just silence. My stomach twisted. The next day, I went to the bank to inquire about the boutique account. Just routine, I told myself. But when the teller pulled up the records, her eyes flickered. "Ma'am," she said gently, "there was a withdrawal last month. Quite a large one." I frowned. "A withdrawal? I didn't authorize that." She hesitated, then slid a slip across the counter. Vanessa's name was printed on it, and beneath it, my property listed as collateral. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The numbers blurred on the page. "That can't be right," I whispered. My home wasn't part of this, but it was. The document was stamped, processed, final. That's when it hit me. The loan I'd helped her get wasn't just in her name. It was tied to everything I owned. My late husband's house, his legacy, my security. I went home and sat at the kitchen table for hours, the slip in my hand. I tried to convince myself she'd made a mistake, that maybe Elliot had confused the documents. But deep down, something darker stirred. The memory of Elliot's words, that smooth voice saying, "Let Vanessa handle things now." That night, I called her. "Vanessa, sweetheart, did you withdraw from the boutique account?" There was a pause on the line. Too long. "Oh, that," she said finally, her tone light. "Yes, Mom. We needed to make some quick adjustments." "Don't worry, Elliot handled it." Elliot handled it. I wanted to scream. "He's not your husband." But instead, I swallowed the words. "Vanessa," I said softly, "you used the house as collateral. You didn't have the right." She sighed. "Mom, please don't start. You said you trusted me. I did trust her. That was the problem. Trust had become my blindness. But what happened next left me speechless. A week later, I received a call from the bank again. A courtesy update, they said. Except this time it wasn't about a withdrawal. It was about an overdue payment. When I asked for the account details, my heart nearly stopped. The boutique account was empty. Not a single dollar left. I called Vanessa again, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone. "Where's the money?" I demanded. Her voice, calm as ever, replied, "It's being reinvested. Elliot knows what he's doing." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something inside me had already cracked. That night I sat on the porch staring at the sea, the same sea that used to bring me peace. And I realized something terrifying. My daughter wasn't being manipulated. She was participating. The next morning, I drove into town to see the boutique space myself. I expected to find construction, maybe a coming soon sign. But the windows were dark. The for lease sign still hung there, untouched, faded from months of sun. My heart pounded as I peeked through the glass. Nothing but dust and emptiness. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. The lie wasn't just financial. It was emotional. She had looked me in the eye and told me everything was fine. That she was working hard. That she was proud to make me proud. And I believed every word. When I confronted her in person later that week, she avoided my gaze. "Mom, it's complicated," she said. "Elliot said we'd tell you when things were settled." I asked her what that meant, and she smiled. That same cold, unfamiliar smile I'd seen on her father's worst enemies. "You wouldn't understand, Mom. You're too sentimental about things that don't matter anymore. Too sentimental." As if love was a weakness, as if memory was an inconvenience. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was whisper, "You're talking about your father's house." Her face softened for a second, or maybe I imagined it. "Mom," she said quietly, "please just trust me." But I couldn't. Not after what I found next. I had gone through her old mail again, desperate for answers. That's when I found it, a crumpled receipt tucked between fashion magazines. It was dated months ago, a payment to a law firm I'd never heard of. The note beside it read, "Property title transfer consultation, paid in full." My blood ran cold. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about ownership. I sat there staring at that receipt, my hands shaking so badly it nearly slipped from my grasp. That's when I realized she hadn't been careless. She'd been careful, calculated. Every move, every smile, every "don't worry, Mom," was part of something she'd planned for months. I thought betrayal was loud, messy, and obvious. But this kind? This betrayal moved in silence. It smiled at you over dinner. It called you Mom, while it took everything that made you who you were. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't losing my house. I was losing my daughter. But it wasn't over yet. Because hidden beneath that receipt was something else. Something that made my stomach drop, and my breath catch all at once. A name I recognized. The name of the man she had sold it to. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about revenge. Because the man who bought my home, the one Vanessa had trusted so completely, wasn't a stranger to me at all. And that receipt was just the beginning. I used to think pain came in waves, sharp, visible, impossible to ignore. But this pain was different. It was quiet, It crept through the walls of my own home like smoke, choking me slowly before I even realized I couldn't breathe. After that receipt, nothing felt safe anymore. I started noticing things, little things, that had always been there but suddenly carried weight. Vanessa's phone lighting up with unknown numbers she silenced instantly. The way she flinched when the mailman brought letters from the bank. The late-night whispers that stopped the second my footsteps echoed in the hallway. One night, I stood outside her door, listening. Her voice was trembling. "Elliot, we can't keep doing this." She's starting to ask questions. A pause. His voice came next, low, controlled. "Then make sure she stops." My blood ran cold. I wanted to burst in, to demand answers, but fear pinned me to the floor. What would I even say? That I was scared of my own daughter? That the man she loved made my skin crawl? Instead, I waited until the light under her door vanished. Then I turned the knob and stepped inside. The room smelled like perfume and panic, the kind of air that clings to secrets. Empty wine bottles on the desk, ripped envelopes scattered on the floor, and papers half burned in a small metal bin. I knelt, picking through the mess, until one folder caught my eye. A thick manila file tucked halfway under the bed. On the front, written in black marker, were 2 words that made my heart stop. Property transfer. I shouldn't have opened it. A part of me knew that. But curiosity was no longer curiosity as it was survival. Inside there were copies of legal documents, neatly arranged, each stamped and notarized. My name was everywhere. Signatures, initials, dates, only I didn't remember signing any of them. The handwriting was perfect. Too perfect. My hand shook as I flipped page after page until one signature line caught my eye. Beneath the seal, I saw a name I recognized. The notary's name. It was Margaret Hale. At first, I couldn't place it. It sounded familiar, like a name I'd heard in passing but never really stored. Then it hit me, Elliot's ex-wife. He'd mentioned her once, offhandedly, over dinner. Something about her being a difficult woman who didn't understand his ambition. I remembered the tone he used, that mixture of disdain and pity men use when they're rewriting history to sound innocent. But what was she doing notarizing my signature? I felt my stomach twist. I called Vanessa immediately. "We need to talk," I said. She arrived within minutes, breathless, defensive, eyes wild. I didn't even raise my voice. I just held up the folder. "What is this?" Her face drained of color. "Mom, where did you get that?" she whispered. "You tell me," I replied. She lunged for the folder, but I pulled it back. "Don't," I warned. "Don't lie to me again." For a moment, she looked like a child again, cornered, terrified, ashamed. Then something in her snapped. "You wouldn't understand," she screamed. "It's not about money, it's about survival." Her words hit me harder than any slap could. Survival? I stared at her, trying to make sense of it. Survival? Whose, Vanessa? Yours or his? She froze. For a moment, her expression betrayed something. Fear, regret, maybe both. Then she turned away. She grabbed her bag and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame cracked. I just stood there, shaking, the folder clutched to my chest. Survival. That word kept echoing in my mind. What was she so afraid of? And why did Elliot's name feel like the shadow behind every answer I couldn't find? That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The ticking of the clock, the groan of the floorboards, the faint hum of the refrigerator. Around midnight, I poured myself a glass of water, but my reflection in the kitchen window stopped me cold. I looked like a stranger, hollow eyes, trembling lips, a woman aging a decade in a week. But something in me hardened. I needed to know who Elliot really was. The next morning, I drove to the town records office. It was a small building, quiet, the kind of place where time seems to slow down. I asked to see any public documents under the name Elliot Sanders. The clerk, an older man, typed the name into the system. He hesitated. "Ma'am," he said, "do you mean Elliot M. Sanders or Elliot J. Sanders?" "Both," I replied. He printed 2 files. My eyes scanned the first. Clean record, no flags. Then the second one, and I felt the room tilt. It wasn't a clean record. It was a trail of red ink. Lawsuits, failed business ventures, 2 restraining orders, and one name repeated across multiple complaints. Margaret Hale. Elliot hadn't just been married to her. He'd ruined her, bankrupt her, and she'd notarized my papers? Either she was helping him, or she was part of something much darker. When I returned home, Vanessa wasn't there. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I searched the house for any sign of her, and that's when I noticed his drawer. Elliot's drawer! He'd moved some of his things into the guest room months ago. I'd ignored it, thinking it was temporary. But now, standing in front of that half-open drawer, I knew I needed to look. Inside, everything was too neat. Cufflinks aligned, watches in perfect rows, not a single speck of dust. But beneath the folded shirts, my fingers brushed against something thin and cold, a metal folder clasp. I pulled it out. Inside were documents, sealed in a plastic sleeve. The first page was an insurance form. My name was listed as the insured. The beneficiary? Elliot Sanders. I felt the blood drain from my face. My life insurance. I never named him. He wasn't even family. But there it was, signed and dated. My supposed authorization, notarized by the same woman. Margaret Hale. My knees nearly gave out. My daughter hadn't just been tricked into a bad investment. She'd been pulled into something far worse. This wasn't about property anymore. It was about erasing me completely. I could almost hear his voice again. Calm, reassuring, deceitful. You deserve to rest, Mrs. James. Let Vanessa handle things now. Rest. The word took on a new meaning. I stumbled back, clutching the papers, my heart beat loud in my ears. Every part of me wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Because in that moment, I realized the truth. Elliot never planned to share my world. He planned to inherit it, and the proof was right there in that drawer. But what I found behind the next stack of documents made my blood run colder than ever before. It was a letter, unsigned but typed in his voice. A contingency plan. And at the top, in bold letters, it read, "In the event of her untimely death." That's when I knew. I was never meant to survive this sale. The morning after I found the insurance papers, I realized silence was no longer safety. It was surrender. My hands shook as I dialed the number I'd kept buried in an old address book. "Martin," I said, voice trembling. "It's Evelyn. I need your help." He'd been my late husband's closest friend, a retired lawyer with a sharp mind and a moral compass that never wavered. When I told him what had happened, the forged signatures, the sale, the insurance, he didn't interrupt once. He just said quietly, "Bring everything you have. Now." His office smelled of old books and coffee. I handed him the folder, and he began reading in silence, his brow furrowing deeper with every page. When he finally looked up, his face was pale. "Evelyn," he said, "they've gone further than you think." My stomach dropped. He laid out the evidence like puzzle pieces. Elliot had filed documents declaring me mentally unfit, backed by forged medical records and a fabricated evaluation from a doctor who didn't even exist. The sale of my beach house wasn't just theft. It was part of a coordinated scam. "They're not just after the property," Martin said grimly. "They're trying to strip you of your inheritance rights. Once this sale goes through, you won't legally exist in the estate system as a competent owner." I remember whispering, "He's killing me without touching me." Martin's jaw tightened. "And he's using your daughter to do it." That sentence broke me. I'd been clinging to the idea that Vanessa was being manipulated, that she was trapped in his web like I was. But the evidence said otherwise. She'd signed things, authorized them, lied to me. Again and again, I wanted to deny it, to scream that my daughter wasn't capable of this. But deep down, I knew. Love had blinded her, or worse, turned her into him. We spent the next few days gathering every scrap of evidence. Martin filed a temporary injunction to freeze the property sale, but the court date came faster than I expected. I still remember the night before the hearing. I couldn't sleep. Every shadow in the house looked like betrayal wearing my daughter's face. I kept hearing Elliot's voice in my head. Let Vanessa handle things now. The next morning, I made breakfast as if it were any other day. Vanessa came in late, eyes swollen, avoiding mine. I forced a calm I didn't feel. "We're having dinner tonight," I told her. "You, me, and Elliot." She hesitated, then nodded. That evening, The table was set for 3, candlelight flickering across polished silverware that suddenly felt like weapons. Elliot arrived first, too confident, too smooth. He kissed Vanessa on the temple and sat across from me with a smirk that barely hid his contempt. I waited until the meal was halfway done before I spoke. My voice was steady, almost gentle. "Elliot," I said, "did you ever wonder why I never saw you visit a hospital with Vanessa's father, even when he was sick?" His hand froze around his glass. "Excuse me?" I leaned in. "Because I know you avoid hospitals. Not because you dislike them, but because one doctor there could expose the fake report you used." Vanessa's fork clattered against her plate. "Mom, stop." But I didn't. I pulled out the insurance policy from my purse and placed it between us. "You both signed it." I didn't. Elliot's expression didn't change. That was the worst part. He didn't even flinch. "You've misunderstood," he said smoothly. "We were protecting your assets. By selling my home? By forging my name?" My voice cracked. "By declaring me insane?" Vanessa reached across the table, tears brimming. "Mom, please, don't ruin this for me." That sentence shattered whatever was left of my restraint. Ruin this for her? I had spent my life protecting her, building her future from my own sacrifices. And now she was asking me not to ruin her scheme to erase me. I stood up. "You already did that," I whispered. She looked down, silent, as Elliot calmly folded the policy and slid it back toward me. "You'll see, Mrs. James," he said softly. "It's better this way." Something inside me snapped. Fear burned away, replaced by something sharper. Fury wrapped in purpose. That night I packed every document, every letter, every forged signature into a leather folder. I was done being silent. The next morning, Martin met me outside the courthouse. His eyes were tired but determined. "Are you ready?" he asked. I nodded, though I didn't feel ready for anything. Inside, the courtroom smelled of wood polish and tension. Vanessa sat at the front, her face pale. Elliot sat beside her, perfectly composed, his hand resting lightly on her knee. When the judge entered, my heart pounded so loudly I thought it might drown out his voice. Martin spoke first, laying out the evidence, the forgeries, the false medical declarations, the manipulated sale. Each word was a knife, and every knife pointed toward Elliot. But I could see Vanessa shrinking beside him, realizing, piece by piece, what she had helped destroy. Then the judge said, "Mrs. James, please step forward." I stood. My knees trembled. The courtroom fell silent, and that's when I saw him, the man standing beside Vanessa. My breath caught, because the man beside her wasn't Elliot. Her hand was gripping someone else's. Someone older, unfamiliar, wearing the same smug expression Elliot used to wear. The judge frowned. "Ma'am," he said, "you recognize this individual?" I couldn't speak, because in that instant I realized the man beside her wasn't a replacement. He was the one behind everything, and suddenly I understood. Elliot had never been the end of this story. He was just the beginning. "I need you to breathe, ma'am," the bailiff whispered as he opened the heavy courtroom door. But how could I breathe when everything I'd built, everyone I'd loved, was about to be stripped bare under those cold fluorescent lights? Cameras flashed. Papers shuffled. My name echoed across the room like a sentence. Vanessa sat on the left bench, pale as ivory, her fingers trembling against the wooden rail. Beside her wasn't Elliot, it was Daniel. The realization hit me like ice water down my spine. Elliot wasn't coming. He'd vanished. And this man, this brother, had taken his place. The judge's voice sliced through the air. "Mrs. Whitaker, please take the stand." My heels clicked like gunshots against the floor as I walked forward. Every camera followed, every whisper tightened the air. The prosecutor began reading through the documents. One by one, the lies unfolded like poisoned petals. The forged medical reports, the false declaration of insanity, the illegal transfer of ownership. Each revelation was a blow to the chest. I wanted to look away, to disappear, but I couldn't. Not anymore. Then the door at the back of the courtroom opened and Daniel rose. Calm, controlled, too calm. "Your Honor," he said, "my brother acted out of desperation." My blood turned to fire. Desperation? That word insulted every wound he'd left behind. Daniel continued, voice steady. He's fled the country. He wanted to save what he could. Vanessa didn't know the full extent of his actions. His gaze flicked toward my daughter, soft, almost pitying. It made me sick, but I couldn't look away, because I needed to see what Vanessa would do. She didn't defend him. She didn't speak at all, just sat there, staring at her own hands like they didn't belong to her. The judge motioned to the bailiff, who placed another folder on the table, and in that folder were bank records, transfers, signatures, her signature. Every transaction tied back to that house, to me, to my life. The lawyer beside me whispered, he used her as the final link. He needed a family signature to make it look clean. When the judge read that aloud, Vanessa broke. Her sobs weren't delicate. They were raw, animal sounds that tore through the silence. I didn't know, Mom, she cried, mascara bleeding down her cheeks. I swear I didn't know. The sound twisted something inside me. For the first time, I believed her. I saw the little girl she once was. Not the woman who'd betrayed me, but the child who used to cling to my arm when thunder frightened her. But that belief didn't heal anything. It only made the pain sharper, because believing her meant accepting that she'd been used. The judge's gavel struck once. The court declares the sale null and void. The property and associated assets are to be returned immediately. Further investigation into Mr. Elliot Harper's fraud and disappearance is to proceed under criminal charges. His words felt like justice, and yet they didn't feel like victory. Justice doesn't erase humiliation. It doesn't return stolen years. It just ends the noise. Reporters rushed forward, shouting my name. Vanessa reached for me, whispering, Mom, please. I didn't mean to lose you. I turned to her, and for a heartbeat, I wanted to hold her. But then I remembered every sleepless night, every cruel word she defended him for. The silence between us became unbearable. I believed her, but I couldn't forgive her. When the courtroom emptied, I stood there alone, my reflection faintly visible in the polished floor. The walls seemed to hum with what was left unsaid. I should have felt triumphant. I'd won, hadn't I? But victory felt hollow when it came at the price of blood ties. That's when I realized something I never wanted to face. Freedom doesn't come clean. It stains you. It strips away who you were before. And as the echoes of my own footsteps followed me out of that courtroom, I knew one thing for certain. I was finally free. But freedom came at a cost I wasn't ready to pay. The house didn't look the same anymore. Maybe it was the new paint, softer, warmer, or maybe it was me. I stood on that porch for the first time in months, watching the sea stretch endlessly toward the horizon, and I realized how strange it was to feel peace in the same place that had once witnessed my destruction. The old boards creaked beneath my feet like they were sighing with me. I'd repainted the walls, replaced the curtains, even changed the locks. But some nights, when the wind slipped through the cracks, I still swore I could hear the echoes of Elliot's voice. Not haunting, just reminding me of promises, of betrayal, of everything that nearly broke me. Vanessa started visiting every Sunday. The first time she came, she stood on the porch for a long time, holding a basket of flowers, unsure if I'd let her in. I didn't say a word. I just opened the door and turned away. That was all the invitation she needed. We didn't talk much that day, or the next, or the one after that, but there was something healing about sitting side by side, saying nothing at all. Sometimes silence speaks louder than apologies ever could. The air between us softened over time. She'd bring coffee and stories about the women she was helping now. Women who'd lost everything to men who controlled their money, their minds, their hope. I'd listen, quietly proud, quietly sad. It was her way of atoning, I think. Her way of finding herself again after realizing how easily she'd been used. Once she looked at me and said, I thought love was about trusting someone completely. Now I know it's about trusting yourself enough to walk away. I didn't answer, but I smiled, because she'd finally learned what took me a lifetime to understand. When the court sentenced Elliot, I didn't feel triumph. I felt closure. He'd been caught in Spain, trying to withdraw what was left of the stolen funds. They said he didn't fight the extradition, just signed the papers and kept his head down. Maybe guilt finally found him. Maybe it was just exhaustion. Either way, I stopped following the news after that. Some people deserve to fade quietly. Justice had been served, but peace had to be earned. One evening, I walked to the edge of the property where the old fence used to be. The sea was restless, waves colliding like they were arguing with the shore. I sold that piece of land not out of pain, but peace. I wanted to let go of the parts of my life that hurt too much to hold. Watching the tide roll in, I could almost hear my husband's voice again. Never let them take your peace. It wasn't about property or inheritance or even reputation. It was about not letting the world harden you beyond repair. Vanessa joined me on the porch one Sunday, the sunset painting her face gold. We didn't talk about Elliot anymore. We didn't need to. Our conversations had changed. Gentler, honest, sometimes even funny. She told me she'd started painting again. I told her the house finally felt like home. There were still cracks in our story, but they were filled now. Not with resentment, but with time. And time, I learned, doesn't erase pain. It just teaches you how to live with it. Some nights I still wake to the sound of waves and whisper his name. Not out of longing, but gratitude. Because even in his absence, he left me with the strength to rebuild. The sea whispers back, soft and steady, as if to say I kept my promise. And maybe I did. Maybe surviving and truly surviving was my way of keeping it. I look at Vanessa now and see a woman, not a child. I see my own reflection in her strength, my past mistakes in her eyes, and my future in her forgiveness. So if you're listening to this, if you've ever been betrayed by someone you raised, someone you loved, someone you trusted, ask yourself this: what would you do? Forgive your child or walk away forever? I chose forgiveness, not because she deserved it, but because I did. Because carrying hate was just another form of captivity. And as I sit on this porch, the sea humming its endless lullaby, I finally understand the truth I'd been searching for all along. Freedom is the greatest inheritance.